Hello and welcome to this video tutorial brought to you by tastytudes.com. In this video, I will be showcasing a particular tool called the Image Trace tool, known in earlier versions of Illustrator as the Live Trace tool. We will be taking a look at this tool, how it works, and later on I will be discussing its pros and cons and why we may or may not want to use it. To follow along with this tutorial, you will need to open this document. This can be found in the Test Project folder in the Project folder. You can download this project folder for free. The download link is in the description. So with the project folder open, click Test Project, Setup, Image Trace, Versions, and select the version of Illustrator you're using. In my case, it's CC, and open the Image Trace file, and you should have something that looks like this. Now, we are going to be covering various topics in this tutorial. If you wish to skip ahead to any point in the video or back, you can do so quite simply. The topics covered in this video are listed in the description, along with their times, so be sure to check that out. So let's get into it. In the last video, we looked at how to set up a document and place a bitmap pixel-based image into our composition ready to trace. In this video, I'm going to use this document example to demonstrate and introduce you to the Image Trace tool. If you have this document open, you too can follow along and have a go yourself. So what is the Image Trace tool? Well, the Image Trace tool is a way to very quickly convert bitmap pixel-based images, pictures and photos into vector artwork. If you have an image selected on your canvas area, you can find the Image Trace tool button up in the control panel. As you can see, I have a button here called Image Trace. In most recent versions of Illustrator, this tool has been changed. This tool was formerly called the Live Trace tool. If you're using an earlier version, you may have to follow along using the Live Trace tool. They pretty much work in the same way, though in recent versions of Illustrator, the tool itself has been slightly changed. You can still find it up in the control panel as the Live Trace button. So why use this tool? Well, the Image Trace tool is very popular with artists and illustrators who wish to turn their paper drawings or reference photo images into vector artwork, which they can refine and apply color effects to. In my case, I have a hand-drawn sketch here, which I want to convert into vector artwork, potentially adding lots of color and experimenting with some effects. We can use the Image Trace tool to quickly convert this sketch into a vector. Now, the great thing about vector artwork is that it can be shrunk to the size of a pinhead or blown up to the size of a building and still retain clarity and sharpness and not become pixelated like what can happen with pixel-based graphics. So if we look at the first artboard, this is a drawing I have prepared earlier. It's been scanned and placed into my document. At the moment, this is a bitmap image. This is a pixel-based image. If we select the image with the selection tool, we can see a bounding box around it. And if we zoom in close, we can see the paper texture and the drawing in more detail. So if we come on to the next artboard, we have another example here. Though this time, with the selection tool, if I select this image, we can see it is indeed a vector shape. And if we zoom in here, we can see all the anchor points that make up the artwork. This example here was created from our pixel-based image here to the left using the Image Trace tool. If I come across to the next two examples, we can see we have some other color effects. When you convert your hand-drawing sketch or image into a vector using the Image Trace tool, you will find you can apply color very easily. If I come over to the right here, we can see this image has a stroke effect applied to it. If I select this example and look at the color arrangement in the Tools menu, we can see it simply has a stroke with a gradient color applied. If I click on the Swap Fill and Stroke button, we can see this is simply the vector of our hand-drawn sketch with a color gradient applied. So upon using the Image Trace tool, you can quickly apply effects to your drawings that would otherwise take you a long time. So how do we use the Image Trace tool? So I'm going to toggle the visibility of the example layer so we are not distracted by this. And to use the Image Trace tool in CC, you will need to have your image trace panel open. And I'm just going to drag it out so we can clearly see this. If you cannot see yours, come up to Window, scroll down and select Image Trace. If you're using an earlier version of Illustrator, don't worry about this for now. So first come over and select the blue example and delete it. Come to the left and select our pixel-based image. Press Command C to copy and Command V to paste and drag our copy image over to the right artboard. Once we are happy with the positioning of the image, make sure the image is selected with the selection tool and has the bounding box around it. Now we need to come up to the control panel and look for the image trace tool button. It should be towards the middle of the control panel. So I'm going to go ahead and click the image trace tool button once. Upon click, you will see Illustrator begin to process the image, and suddenly the image appears to have been converted, though it's not done quite yet. Next, we need to toggle a bunch of properties to get the effect we want. And this is done in the Image Trace Tool panel here. If you're using the Live Trace tool, you will find the tools in the top control panel. So if we look in the Image Trace Tool panel, here we have a number of options to choose from. Starting from the top, we have a series of buttons here. We have Auto Color, High Color, Low Color, Grayscale, Black and White, and Outline. These are a few presets that upon click will apply an effect to our live trace image. Now, it's important to mention that the Image Trace tool can take a lot of processing time. The bigger your pixel image, the longer it will take to apply the effect. We have a really simple example here. It's just a black and white sketch. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the black and white button. And that's going to optimize the settings for a black and white image. Now, if we want to, we can click on the Preset tab and select from a range of other color options. Though we are just going to keep it set to black and white on this occasion. We are going to keep View set to Tracing Result and Mode to black and white. Next, we have the threshold. Now, this is probably one of the main properties you want to pay attention to, as this can alter the effect entirely. For earlier versions of Illustrator, this can be found in the control panel, next to the Live Trace button. So with the image selected, I'm going to toggle the threshold down to 50, and we can see the amount of black used decreases, but quite subtly. If we decrease the threshold down to, say, 25, we can see this time the amount of black decreases significantly. If we put the threshold up to, say, 169, we can increase the depth of the black. And if we push the threshold up to 244, we can see a significant increase in the black. So you can toggle the threshold to get an effect you're happy with. On this occasion, I'm going to go with around 200. That's looking quite bold there. On the Image Trace panel, we also have an advanced option, and if I click this, we can also toggle paths, corners, and noise. Now, these toggle subtle details of the vector. For example, we can push the paths up and bring the paths down. We can toggle this to further refine the appearance of our image trace. I'm going to place my paths to 80% and just toggle away the advanced option for now. So now we have a good image trace example, and that's looking pretty close to my original scanned drawing. So now I'm ready to move on. Notice how our current selection has a bounding box still around the image. Well, this is because we now have to expand the artwork. So once you have toggled your image trace properties and you're happy, next we are going to come up and click on the Expand button. This button can be found in the control panel where the Image Trace button was. Upon click, we have now essentially expanded the vector artwork, and now we can see all the vector anchor points that make up the vector artwork. So now this image is no longer a pixel image, it is now vector artwork, and we can expand and shrink this as much as we like, and we will not lose any quality. So I'm going to click off for a second to deselect, and then click back on. Though notice now it's all selected. What we have here is a black and white vector composition that is currently grouped. When you expand your image trace, the artwork is always grouped. If we right-click and select Ungroup, click off to deselect, and then select the white area just next to the black, you will see we have now made a selection of a vector containing the white space around our drawing. So now all the shapes that make up this black and white vector composition have been separated. And we can change the color of this. For example, I'll select a green from up in the swatches panel. Easy. Though I don't want this vector shape, so I'll simply delete it. So now with the selection tool, we can click around our new vector artwork and select the various vector shapes that make up this composition. And if we want to, with the various white shapes inside our black outline, we can select them and add color. Easy. So I'll just undo that to get back to my black and white image. So if it's that easy to convert a sketch into vector artwork, then why spend a lot of time tracing a sketch using the pen tools? Well, it all really comes down to what effect you want to achieve in your artwork. Here is a document I've prepared as an example. You can also find this in the project folder. So yes, it is very quick to use the image trace tool, and yes, it does take a long time to trace a sketch using the drawing tools, but as you can see here, the comparison says it all. If you want an organic, hand-drawn appearance, then definitely go with the image trace tool. Though, if you want an outcome like the one you see here on the right, you will have to spend a little more time tracing using the drawing tools. When you trace a sketch using the drawing tools, you will get a much cleaner, graphic and stylized outcome. As you can see here, this is an example I traced using the drawing tools, and I have also taken the artwork further by adding in some details around the eyes and on the decoration. So that's a brief introduction on how you can use the image trace tool to quickly convert your sketch into vector artwork. In the next video, we are going to use the drawing tools in Adobe Illustrator to trace a drawing. We are going to be using the pen tool, the brush tool, the blob brush tool, and the eraser tool to convert this drawing into vector artwork. See you in the next video.